The savage life of a space wolf is not what the Imperium believes. I still remember the taste of my own blood on that first night, when the fangs began to grow. True Fenrisian fangs. They pushed through my gums in fever dreams, splitting flesh as they descended. We are called the Emperor's executioners, his wolves of war. But what the Imperium does not understand is this. We do not simply wear the wolf as our symbol. We become the wolf. It lives in us, grows in us, and, eventually, for some of us, it consumes us entirely. I have watched my brothers fight the change, their bodies twisting, their minds slipping closer to the beast with each battle. The question that haunts my dreams is whether we truly tame the beast within, or merely delay the inevitable surrender to its call. Are we warriors blessed with the strength of wolves, or are we simply monsters waiting to be born? I am Bjorn Rihalvar of Fenris, once a tribesman who hunted the great kraken of the world sea, now something far less and infinitely more than human. The Allfather remade me in the image of Russ, our Primarch. Yet Russ himself was touched by the wildness of our home world. Fenris marks its children forever, and still the question returns, night after night. Do we master the wolf, or only postpone the moment it takes what it is owed? My saga begins, as all Space Wolf sagas do, in ice and blood, in the trials of Asaheim, where boys die so that warriors might be born. But unlike the tales told in mead halls across the Imperium, there is no glory in our transformation. There is only pain, madness, and the slow death of everything human within us. A remembrancer once chronicled our great company's latest campaign and called us heroes. He spoke of honor and courage, of savage nobility. I watched him write those lies with steady hands, never once looking into our eyes. For if he had truly seen us, truly understood what we become in the heat of battle, he would have written only of monsters. The fang rises from the surface of Fenris like a spear thrust into the heart of the sky. It was my home now, though home is too gentle a word for a fortress monastery carved from a mountain of ice and stone. I remember standing at the base of that impossible structure, my village clothing in tatters, my body broken by trials that had claimed the lives of 100 other aspirants. I was 12 Terran years old, though on Fenris, with its punishing cycles, I had seen only 3 winters. 3 winters was enough to learn that survival required savagery. The wolf priests spoke of transformation as rebirth. But what awaited me was not birth. It was a calculated dismemberment. They would tear apart the boy from the ice plains and rebuild him as a weapon. The helix, they called it. The sacred gene seed of Russ himself. But gene seed is too clean, too clinical for what invaded my body. It was a contagion of strength and fury, rewriting what the Emperor intended for humanity. The weak would not survive the change. A wolf priest told us, his face a maze of ritual scars and weathered lines. To pray to the Allfather that we were not among the weak. We did not pray. Sons of Fenris do not beg, even of gods. We snarled our defiance at death, even as it claimed 2 aspirants that very night. Their bodies rejected the gift, their organs liquefied as the Canis Helix searched them and found them unworthy. I remember their screams most clearly, not for their volume, not for their desperation, but for how quickly they changed from human cries to animal howls. Even in death, the wolf began to emerge. The initiation chamber beneath the fang was ancient beyond reckoning, its walls inscribed with runes whose meanings had been lost even to the eldest wolf priests. We were brought there in chains, not of metal, but of frost-numbed muscle and a will paralyzed by fear. 20 survivors out of the original 300. 20 pale, scarred bodies laid upon stone slabs older than the Imperium itself. Blood calls to blood, intoned the wolf priest as he moved between us, a ceremonial knife in his gnarled hand. The blood of Russ calls to the worthy. The knife was ancient iron, not the masterworked power blades carried by full battle brothers. This ritual demanded older, cruder tools. He sliced open my chest with mechanical precision. The pain was blinding, yet distant, as though it belonged to someone else. Into the wound, he placed a small vial of liquid that burned like the most caustic acid. "Drink of the cup of wrath," he whispered as he moved to the next aspirant. "Drink deep." What followed was not transformation. It was annihilation. My bones broke and reformed. My organs failed and were replaced by new glands and secondary systems. My blood boiled as the Canis Helix, the wolf's touch, the legacy of Russ, spread through me like molten metal. The human mind cannot comprehend such pain. It shuts down, it retreats into a void, and into that void rushed something else, something with fangs and claws and a hunger that could never be sated. I felt it circling inside my consciousness, testing the boundaries of my identity, searching for weakness. "Fight it!" growled a voice near my ear, though no one stood beside my slab. "Fight it, but do not reject it. Those who reject the wolf die. Those who surrender to it become the lost. You must walk the narrow path between." I had no concept of time in those days. Pain became a universe unto itself, expanding and contracting with each ragged breath. My senses, already sharp from a childhood spent hunting in Fenrisian darkness, became unbearable conduits of information. I could smell the harsh sweat of an aspirant 10 slabs away. I could hear the labored beating of his twin hearts as they struggled to find their rhythm. 13 survived the initial change. 7 bodies were burned in sacred fires, their ashes scattered on the winds of Asamheim so their strength might return to the world that had birthed them. We 13 were no longer human, but neither were we yet space wolves. We existed in a torturous middle ground, bodies remade, minds scrambling to keep up with the new reality of our existence. "Now comes the blooding," announced the wolf priest when we could finally stand. "Now we see if the wolf accepts you as pack." They brought us to the surface of Fenris, to a vast ice plain where auroras painted the night in green and blue. The cold struck my bare skin like a physical blow. Clean, clarifying, after the fever dreams of remaking. I looked at my brothers and truly saw them for the first time since the ritual began. We were changed, taller, broader, corded with unnaturally dense muscle. But it was our eyes that marked the depth of it. Not human eyes, predator eyes. Gold-flecked irises staring out from faces that still pretended to be men. The wolf priest planted 13 spears in the ice before us, primitive weapons tipped with the teeth of Fenrisian wolves. Beside them lay 13 sets of crude armor fashioned from the hides of those same beasts. "Take up your weapons," he commanded. "Don your armor tonight. You hunt with the pack, or you die beneath their fangs." The howls began, as the last light of day vanished behind Fenris's mountain ranges. Not the howls of men imitating beasts, but the genuine calls of true Fenrisian wolves, monstrous creatures that could tear a normal human limb from limb with casual ease. They were coming for us. The wolf priest had summoned the pack, and now we would either join it or become its prey. "Remember," the wolf priest said as he retreated toward the distant outline of a gunship, "you are neither beast nor man now. You are something in between. Find that balance, or the ice will drink your blood before dawn." Then we were alone, 13 transformed boys clutching spears on an endless ice field, with the voices of approaching predators echoing across the plain. What happened that night exists in my memory as a chain of disjointed images, like a broken picked capture flickering in darkness. The first wolf that came for me was a scarred male, its shoulders rising as high as my chest despite my new height. Its fangs were yellowed ivory daggers, its breath steaming in the frozen air. I raised my spear, the hard lessons of the trials guiding my hands. But something else guided me too. Something deeper, older, more primal than any doctrine. The wolf within recognized the wolf without, and in that recognition came understanding. I did not fight as a human warrior with a spear. I fought as a wolf fights, with total commitment and no concept of retreat. When the beast lunged, I met it halfway, driving myself into its mass while angling my spear into the soft flesh beneath its jaw. Hot blood sprayed across my face and chest, instantly freezing in the Fenrisian cold. The taste of it woke something in me. The iron tang of blood, the musk of wolf, the sharp edge of adrenaline. Together they sent my heightened senses into a frenzy. I snarled, lips pulled back from lengthening canines, and wrenched the spear free to meet the next attacker. They came in waves, not mindless beasts but coordinated hunters, testing our strength and resolve. 2 of my brothers fell that night, their blood steaming briefly on the ice before freezing into crimson crystals. The rest of us fought with increasing savagery as the hours bled away, our movements becoming less human and more lupine with each passing heartbeat. By dawn, 11 of us still stood, surrounded by the bodies of wolves, our skin and armor slick with blood, both theirs and our own. But we were not alone. Circling us at a respectful distance was the remainder of the pack, led by an enormous alpha whose fur was as white as the snow itself. The wolf priest approached across the slaughtered field, his armor rimed with frost, made almost majestic by the pink light of dawn. Behind him came a figure whose presence drove us to our knees in the bloodied snow. Wolf Lord Crom Dragongaze, master of the Third Great Company, had come to witness our blooding. His Terminator armor was hung with trophies from 100 campaigns, his wolf pelt cloak snapping in the Arctic wind. But it was his eyes that held me, colder than the depths of the void, yet burning with a restrained violence that promised it could erupt at any moment. "Rise, whelps," he growled, his voice like stone grinding against stone. "You have survived the night. Now we will see if you are worthy to hunt in my pack." At his gesture, the alpha wolf approached. None of us moved as the massive creature walked straight to Crom and sat at his side like a trained hound rather than a wild apex predator. "The pack has judged you," Crom announced. "Those who fell were weak. Those who stand have earned the right to become Bloodclaws." Bloodclaws, the most junior rank of the space wolves, thrown into the front line of every engagement where aggression and lack of discipline could be shaped into a weapon. I felt no pride, only a strange hollowness. I had survived, but the boy from the ice plains was truly dead. What stood in his place was something caught between worlds. "You belong to me now," Crom continued, his gaze sweeping across our bloodied forms. "Your lives are mine to spend in the Emperor's service. Your deaths are mine to offer to the foes of mankind. From this day forward, you have no family but the pack, no purpose but war, no loyalty but to Russ, the All-Father, and to me." They gave us new names that day. No longer would I be known by the name my human parents had given me. Now I was simply Bjornrik, Bloodclaw of Crom Dragongaze's great company. My identity was stripped down to function. Weapon. Fang. As we were led back toward the Fang, I glanced over my shoulder at the ice field where we had fought. Servitors were already collecting the bodies of the fallen, both wolf and aspirant. Their blood had mingled on the ice, indistinguishable from one another. In that moment, I understood a fundamental truth about what I had become. We are called the Space Wolves, but the name is not mere symbolism. The beast lurks within us all. Some brothers embrace it too fully and are lost to the Wulfen curse, becoming the very monsters we are sworn to hunt. Others deny it and suffer for their resistance. The path of the space wolf is to acknowledge the beast, to draw strength from it, but never to fully surrender to its call. It would be many years before I understood how narrow that path truly was, or how many of my brothers would stray from it into savagery beyond redemption. The first time I killed in the Emperor's name, I felt nothing but the wolf's joy in the hunt. We were deployed to a small mining world in the Loki sector, its name long forgotten, a routine compliance action. The planetary governor had withheld imperial tithes for 3 consecutive cycles, claiming hardship while his personal wealth swelled. Such matters were meant for the Imperial Guard or local enforcers. But we were newly blooded Bloodclaws, and Crom Dragongaze believed in practical education. We were sent to make an example, so no other world in the sector would entertain similar transgression. I remember the weight of my chains word, the unfamiliar press of armor against flesh still healing from remaking. We had not yet earned true battle plate. Instead, we wore the stripped-down carapace of blood claws. It chafed in places, hung too heavy in others. The machine spirit had not yet learned me, had not yet bonded with my movement, my instincts. Simple mission, growled Ironblood, our pack leader, a grizzled veteran with a bionic eye and more campaigns behind him than I had years of life. We drop. We find the governor. We return with his head. Any resistance is to be eliminated with extreme prejudice. There were 9 of us on that first hunt. 9 blood claws eager to prove ourselves, to spill first blood in service of the chapter. The drop pods slammed into the ceremonial gardens of the governor's palace with bone-jarring force. Before the doors had fully opened, I was already tasting blood in my mouth. Not from injury, but anticipation. The Canis helix responds to the proximity of violence, preparing the body for combat in ways both subtle and grotesque. I felt my canines lengthen, pressing against my lower lip. My vision sharpened. Color bled away until only movement remained, and the shapes of possible threats. The wolf was waking, and I welcomed its hunger. The palace guards were PDF troopers, local militia with flak armor and standard-issue laser guns. They might as well have carried sticks for all the harm they could do to an Astartes, even freshly made ones like us. I still remember the first guard's expression as I emerged from the drop pod. Not fear, not at first. Confusion, as though his mind could not categorize what he was seeing. By the time fear finally bloomed in his eyes, my chainsword was already arcing toward his neck. The resistance, such as it was, lasted less than 10 minutes. We moved through the palace like a storm, bolters and blades reaping a harvest of death. I killed 17 men that day. I remember the number precisely because each death felt like a marker, a milestone in the new existence I could no longer deny. But it was the governor himself who truly taught me what I had become. We found him cowering in a panic room beneath his private chambers. Ironblood tore the reinforced door from its hinges with his power fist, adamantium crumpling like parchment in his grasp. The man who had defied the Imperium was fat and soft, his fine robe stained with sweat and filth. He babbled as we entered, offering wealth, women, anything if we would spare his life. The All-Father's justice recognizes no bribes. Ironblood said, his voice unexpectedly formal as he recited ritual words. Chrome Dragongaze sends his regards. Then he gestured to me, the youngest of the pack. The whelp needs blooding. Finish it, pup. I stepped forward, my chainsword wet with the blood of the governor's guards. Something in me, some last fragment of human measure, noticed how pathetic the man was. No warrior, no worthy opponent, no test of skill. Killing him would bring no glory. The sword is too good for him, I heard myself growl, my voice thickened by lengthening canines and the rising influence of the wolf. The All-Father demands tribute. The wolf demands meat. What happened next sits in my memory behind a crimson veil. I know I dropped my chainsword. I know I fell upon the governor with hands and teeth. I know the taste of his blood, horribly familiar, as if it echoed the Fenrisian wolves I had slain on the ice. When awareness returned, my brothers were watching me with new eyes. Not disgust, not horror, recognition. They saw in my blood-soaked face and gore-dark hands a reflection of the beast within themselves. Ironblood nodded once, then tossed me a chain axe taken from the governor's trophy room. "Clean yourself up, pup," he said. "You fight like a true son of Russ. Perhaps there is hope for you yet." We took the governor's head as ordered. What remained of his body was no longer recognizably human. On the return flight to our strike cruiser, I sat apart from my brothers, trying to reconcile what I had done with the person I had once been. There was no guilt, no remorse, only a strange sense of inevitability. as though I had finally acted in accordance with my true nature. The wolf priest who debriefed us seemed to sense the conflict turning inside me. He found me later in the ship's chapel, not praying, but sitting in silence beneath the stern visage of Leman Russ. "The first hunt is always the most revealing," he said, his voice like gravel shifting underfoot. "It shows us who we truly are beneath the trappings of civilization." "And what am I?" I asked, still staring down at the stone beneath Russ's icon. "What does this make me?" "A weapon," the wolf priest replied without hesitation. "Forged in the fires of Fenris, tempered in the blood of mankind's enemies. But a weapon must be controlled. It must be wielded with purpose. The wolf must hunt, yet it hunts at the direction of its master. And if the wolf slips its leash?" I finally turned to face him. "What then?" His expression did not change, but something flickered behind those ancient eyes. Fear, perhaps, or resignation. "Then you become what we are sworn to destroy," he said simply. "The lost, the Wulfen, those who surrender entirely to the beast and forsake their oaths to the All-Father." He set a gnarled hand on my shoulder. The weight of it was oddly steadying, despite the darkness of his words. "The path of the space wolf is perfect balance," he continued. "We embrace the beast within, draw strength from its primal fury, but never allow it to consume us. This is the burden we bear, the price of our chapter's power." I nodded slowly, understanding for the first time what the transformation truly meant. I was no longer merely a warrior, no longer simply a space marine. I was a vessel for something ancient and terrible, something older than humanity's rise to the stars. "Rest now," the wolf priest said, turning to leave. "Tomorrow you will be assigned to your permanent pack. The real war begins then." As he walked away, I called after him with a question that had burned in me since the night on the ice fields. "How do you know?" I asked. "How do you know when you've gone too far, when the balance has tipped?" He paused, but did not turn. When his voice came, it was barely above a whisper. "When you no longer need to ask," he said. "When the beast's hunger becomes your only truth. That is when we lose you." With those words, he left me alone in the chapel, beneath the golden icon of Russ. I could have sworn the painted eyes held the same conflict that now raged inside my remade flesh. The tension between man and wolf, civilization and savagery, control and abandonment. It was a conflict I would revisit again and again in the decades to come, as the galaxy burned and the enemies of mankind multiplied. The wolf would always be there, waiting for weakness, offering strength in exchange for control. In the heat of battle, sometimes I accepted that bargain. Other times, I resisted its call, but always, I remembered the wolf priest's warning. The true horror was not that we might become beasts in the Emperor's service. The true horror was that we might come to see no difference between the beast and ourselves. The next morning, I was assigned to Bloodclaw Pack Grimfang under Wolfguard Pack Leader Thor Grim Redfist. 8 Bloodclaws in total. Newly blooded, hungry for war, a volatile mix of enhanced strength, limited experience, and the ever-present influence of the Canis Helix working its slow changes upon mind and body. Thor Grim addressed us in the armory as we were fitted with our war gear. His face was a roadmap of old scars. One eye had been replaced with a red augmetic lens that whirred and clicked as it adjusted focus. "Listen well, whelps," he said. "You survived your first taste of blood. Do not let it make you overconfident. True war is nothing like culling a fat governor and his toy soldiers." He paced before us, his Terminator armor making each step a thunderous statement. Servo motors hissed as he moved, ancient ceramite adorned with runes and totems gathered over centuries. Thor Grim was old, even by Astartes standards. Rumors among the Bloodclaws claimed he had fought in the War of the Beast, though none of us dared ask him directly. "You belong to Pack Grimfang now," he continued. "Your brothers are your strength. Your brothers are your shield. Lone wolves die. The pack endures. Remember that when the killing starts and the wolf within begins to howl, That day we received our chapter colors. Space wolves wear the distinctive gray of Fenrisian granite. As blood claws, our shoulder pauldrons bore the mark of our rank, a red slash like a fresh wound against the gray. We were not yet permitted trophies, fetishes, or the personal heraldry worn by older brothers. Those honors would be earned. Each campaign would add its scars to our plate until our armor told the story of our service. Within a week, we were deployed on our first true campaign. The Hother system had reported Xenos activity along its outer mining colonies. Imperial Navy patrols initially suspected Orc involvement, but the situation had escalated beyond their capacity to contain. Wolf Lord Chrome, Dragongaze himself, briefed the assembled great company aboard our strike cruiser, Frost Fang. He stood upon the command dais, massive form dominating the chamber, his voice carrying without amplification. "The green-skinned filth defiles the Emperor's worlds," he growled, one hand resting on the pommel of a frost blade almost as tall as a human. "They mistake his mercy for weakness. They mistake our distance for disinterest. We will correct these misconceptions with bolter and blade." A strategic hololith flickered to life beside him, displaying Holther's planets and orbital installations. Several regions pulsed red, confirmed Orc presence. "Intelligence suggests a minor war in its formative stages," Crom continued, gesturing to the largest concentration. "A war boss calling himself Grimskull Gutter has united several clans and established a foothold on Hother Prime. The Adeptus Mechanicus values the forges there. They have requested our intervention before irreplaceable technology is lost." He smiled, not with humor, but with anticipation. Enlarged canines caught the light. "We are only too happy to oblige. The Sons of Russ have a long history of breaking greenskin skulls." The plan was as direct as Space Wolf strategy tended to be. While the bulk of the great company assaulted the primary Orc stronghold on Hother Prime, Pack Grimfang and 2 other Bloodclaw packs would strike the orbital mining stations, where smaller Orc parties raided for materials and technology. "Your objective is simple," Thor Grim told us as we prepared our gear. "Kill every greenskin you find, secure the stations, protect the tech priests and whatever machine spirits they are so concerned about. Any questions?" One of my pack brothers, Ulfar, raised a hand. "What resistance should we expect, pack leader?" Thor Grim's augmetic eye whirred as it focused on him. "Orcs," he said. "Big, green, stupid. But never underestimate their capacity for violence or their surprising cunning in war. They are born knowing how to fight, unlike you, whelps, who must be taught." He hefted his thunder hammer, an ancient weapon whose head had been carved into a snarling wolf. "Watch, learn, obey. Do those things and you might live long enough to earn a name worth remembering in the sagas." The drop pods screamed through Holther's thin atmosphere like falling meteors. I was strapped in beside my brothers, restraints biting into my armor as deceleration threatened to crush even transhuman bodies. The wolf inside me snarled at confinement, at helpless descent. I forced it down, focusing instead on mission litanies and the battle cant the wolf priests had drilled into us. Impact came with bone-jarring force that would have killed unaugmented men instantly. To us, it was merely brutal discomfort. The pod doors blew outward on explosive bolts, and we charged into the artificial gravity of mining station Secundus. The corridors were a scene of carnage. Mining personnel and station security lay dead across the deck plates. Blood sprayed the metal walls in patterns that spoke of frantic slaughter. The stink of death sat thick in the recycled air, mixed with the distinctive musk of Orc. "Spread out, 2 by 2, Thor Grim ordered over the Vox. "Secure this level, then we move deeper. The tech priests believe the greenskins are after the station's plasma distribution hub." I advanced with Ulfar, bolter raised, senses straining for movement. Orcs had a smell, fungal spores, rancid leather, crude oil. The scent strengthened as we pushed into the main processing deck. The attack came sudden and vicious. A section of wall that looked solid erupted outward. Crude camouflage ripped aside as 5 orcs burst through, roaring, axes and shooters raised. My training took over. I dropped to one knee, braced the bolter, and fired a tight burst into the lead orc's chest. Mass reactive shells punched through leather and detonated inside its torso, ripping it open. Beside me, Wulfen met another with his chains wore, teeth screaming as it bit deep. The remaining 3 split, 2 barreling toward me while the third swung a massive wrench at Wulfen's flank. There was no time to warn him. The 2 coming for me were too close. I fired again, catching one in the face. It collapsed in a ruin of shattered bone and steam. The last orc reached me before I could adjust, its crude axe arcing toward my neck. I caught the blow on my bolter. The casing dented but held. The impact drove me back a step, but my enhanced strength stopped the orc from simply crushing through. With my free hand, I drew my combat knife and drove it up beneath its jaw, into the soft meat where armor didn't exist. The orc roared, pain and fury, hot, viscous blood washing over my gauntlet. It still didn't fall. Orcs were hard to kill, their brutal physiology allowing them to endure wounds that would end a human instantly. The wolf stirred, and with it came a low growl that had nothing to do with Vox systems. Strength surged through me, a brutal clarity fed by the Canis helix. I twisted the knife, ripped it sideways, and nearly severed the orc's head. As it toppled, I turned to Wulfen. He had finished his first opponent, but was locked with the third orc now, pinned against a processing unit. The wrench was pressed across his throat, grinding into his gorget. Even with Astarte's strength, he was struggling. I raised my bolter, no clean shot. They were too tangled, and a miss could rupture something vital in the station. So I charged. I slammed my armored shoulder into the orc with full force, driving all 3 of us through a flimsy partition into an adjacent storage compartment. Crates shattered under our combined weight. The orc lost the wrench. Wulfen fell back, dazed. Now it was just the green skin and me, close enough to smell its breath. It grinned, crude metal teeth jammed into its gums, and reached for jagged scrap torn free from a broken crate. "Wah!" it bellowed, the sound filling the cramped room. I had lost my bolter in the crash. My knife was still lodged in the throat of the orc I'd killed. I was effectively unarmed. The wolf did not see a disadvantage. It saw prey. My vision narrowed, the edges blurring as combat stimulants flooded my system. Time slowed to something thick and viscous. The orc lunged. I sidestepped faster than I should have been able to, seized its weapon arm, and twisted hard. Bones snapped. The orc roared. It did not retreat. Orcs did not retreat. Its free hand swung in a brutal hook that would have taken a normal man's head off. I caught it on my forearm. Ceramite cracked, pain flashed, then dulled, swallowed by battle haze. I stepped inside its reach, hands finding its throat, thumbs digging into the windpipe. The orc thrashed, hammering my helm and pauldrons. I felt cracks spider through my plate. Auto-sealant systems hissed as they engaged. None of it mattered. The wolf had blood scent now, teeth in the kill. I forced the orc down, armor and weight pinning it to the deck plates. Its struggles weakened as my thumbs crushed the life from it. In its last moments, something like recognition flickered in those red eyes. Not fear, but the hard understanding of defeat at the hands of a superior predator. When it finally went still, I remained there, hands still locked at its throat, unable or unwilling to release. It took Wulfen physically dragging me back to break the killing trance. "Brother," he said, voice tinny through his Vox grill. "It is done. The beast is dead." I stared down at my gauntlets, slick with dark blood and flecks of green skin. The wolf receded slowly, reluctantly, leaving me shaking with the chemical aftermath and the raw electric surge of the helix. "More incoming," Thor Grim snapped over the Vox. "Converge on the central processing hub. The tech priests are holed up there with whatever machine spirit they're desperate to protect." We retrieved our weapons and moved out, stepping over the bodies of the orcs we had slain. As we jogged through the corridors, Ulfar glanced sideways at me. Careful, measuring. "You fought like one possessed back there," he said. "The wolf priests warn us about giving too much to the beast within." I wanted to deny it, to claim perfect control. But the evidence was written in my armor. Shattered forearm plate, deep dents where the orc had struck while I focused only on killing. "We are what we are," I said at last. "The wolf gives us strength." Ulfar said nothing more, but I felt his unease like a scent in the air. He had seen something in my trance that troubled him, something beyond the usual savagery of blood claws. We reached the central hub to find the rest of Pack Grimfang already engaged with a larger orc force. The green skins had breached the armored doors and were pouring into the circular chamber where 3 red-robed tech priests stood in defensive formation around a glowing stasis containment unit. Thor Grim was in the thick of it. His thunder hammer fell like judgment, each impact releasing shock waves that hurled orc bodies in broken heaps. The other Bloodclaws fought with the wild abandon typical of our rank, chainswords screaming, bolt pistols barking, a deafening storm of violence. We charged in without hesitation. The battle became a swirl of bodies, brutality, and noise. I emptied my bolter into the mass of green flesh, each round finding a target in the crush. When the magazine ran dry, I drew my knife, the one I'd recovered, and plunged back into the press. Time lost meaning. There was only threat and response. An orc with a crude flamer advancing on an injured brother. A hulking knob bellowing orders, power claw sweeping. A knot of grots trying to slip around the edge and reach the tech priests. I moved from one to the next, guided by training, fueled by the wolf. The knife became an extension of intent, opening throats and driving into weak points with brutal efficiency. When the blade finally shattered against the skull of a particularly thick-headed orc, I continued with gauntleted fists, and with fangs that had fully extended in the heat of killing. "Secure the package," Thor Grim ordered over the vox as the last orc fell. "The tech priests say more inbound." We moved to Extraction Point Alpha. Immediately, I approached the tech priests. Their red robes were splattered darker with orc blood. The lead figure, face a mass of augmetics and wiring, gestured to the stasis unit. "The data core must reach Hother Prime intact," it intoned in a mechanical monotone. "The knowledge within is irreplaceable." Thor Grim nodded once. "Pack Grimfang will ensure delivery. Prepare for immediate evacuation." As we formed a protective cordon around the tech priests and their cargo, I caught Thor Grim watching me. His augmetic eye whirred as it focused, scanning my blood-drenched armor and the exposed lower half of my face, my helmet partially shattered from the fighting. "You fought well today, whelp," he said, low enough for only me to hear. "Perhaps too well. The wolf marks you strongly." Before I could answer, the vox crackled. Urgent. Inbound hostiles. Numbers exceeding previous engagement. Estimated contact in 3 minutes. Thor Grim turned away, his concern replaced by command. "Move out." "Double time," Thor Grim snapped. "We will not die on this Emperor-forsaken scrap heap." The run to extraction became a fighting retreat through corridors that narrowed into killing lanes. The orcs pursued without pause, their crude weapons chewing through bulkheads and conduit runs in their hunger to reach us. We left a trail of improvised defenses. Each position held just long enough to bleed the greenskins, then abandoned for the next choke point. 2 of our brothers fell during that withdrawal. Joran took a heavy slug through the neck joint of his armor. The round punched deep, severed spine and cord, and dropped him like a felled tree despite transhuman flesh. Prof was swallowed by a mob that burst from a maintenance duct, dragged down in a crush of bodies. His last defiance was a howl over the vox before his signal cut to silence. Their deaths fed the wolf in all of us. The retreat grew uglier. Counterattacks became bursts of ferocity that bordered on frenzy. By the time we reached the extraction bay, a docking chamber where a Thunderhawk waited engines hot, we were no longer fighting like disciplined Astartes. We fought like Fenrisian beasts, tooth, claw, and desperate fury. The Thunderhawk's assault ramp dropped. A wolf priest stood at its threshold beside two squads of grey hunters, older brothers who had learned the narrow balance between man and wolf. They laid down disciplined covering fire as we shoved the tech priests and their stasis-bound cargo aboard. "Hurry, you whelps!" the wolf priest barked, staff crackling with restrained power as he directed the retreat. "The station's reactor is destabilizing. The greenskins have damaged it beyond recovery." Thorgrim boarded last. Even in Terminator plate, he moved with shocking speed, backing up the ramp, thunderhammer sweeping in wide arcs to keep the orcs from swarming the threshold. The ramp began to close the instant he cleared it. The engine screamed as the pilot executed an emergency launch. We slammed into our restraint harnesses as the gunship pulled a hard, brutal turn away from the station. Through the viewport, the mining structure shrank into the void, then erupted into a sphere of white-hot plasma as its reactor finally failed. The shockwave struck seconds later, rocking the Thunderhawk violently, but it held. "Your first real hunt," the wolf priest said as he moved among us, sealing wounds with practiced efficiency. "The first of many. You fought well, you bled well, you honored your fallen." His eyes, ancient, knowing, lingered on my face longer than the others. "Some of you felt the call of the wolf more strongly than your brothers. This is both blessing and curse. Remember, you serve the All-Father first, the chapter second, and the wolf last." I nodded, but said nothing. Combat had ended, and the wolf had withdrawn, yet it remained, a shadow along the edges of thought. I had tasted true battle blood and found it sweeter than anything in my life before. Part of me already yearned for the next hunt, the next chance to vanish into that red pace where control became optional. The Holther campaign lasted 3 standard months. Pack Grimfang fought in a dozen more engagements, void clashes aboard orc hulks, brutal tunnel wars in the mining depths of Holther Prime. We lost 2 more brothers. Their names were added to the sagas by the wolf priests, their gene seed harvested to carry the chapter forward. By the time Crom Dragongaze declared the Wa broken and the system secured, I had killed more enemies than I could count. My armor wore the scars of constant war. My body beneath it carried wounds that even enhanced healing could not erase cleanly. We all changed, every survivor of Grimfang. The wolf grew stronger with each engagement, harder to ignore in the quiet between fights. After our return to the Fang, I was summoned before Iron Priest Jürgen, keeper of relics for our great company. His workshop was a cavern of controlled chaos, weapons in pieces, armor in repair frames, servitors shuffling between benches with mindless purpose. "Your armor is a disgrace," Jürgen growled without greeting. His mechadendrites clicked in agitation. "You treat sacred war gear like a disposable shell." I stood at attention, silent. The Iron Priests loved the chapter's physical legacy as fiercely as any oath. To them, armor and blade were extensions of honor, maintained like vows. Jürgen circled me while multiple optical sensors whirred, cataloging the damage. Cracked ceramite, compromised conduits, auto-sealant depleted beyond acceptable parameters. He clicked his tongue, an oddly human sound amid so much machine. "You fight without regard for yourself or your equipment, Bloodclaw." It wasn't a question. I offered no defense. He muttered in Bin Harik to a hovering servo skull that recorded his notes, then finally stopped in front of me. "Thorgrim tells me you show promise," he said. "He also says the wolf marks you strongly. An interesting combination. Potential, tempered by risk." He gestured to a suit of armor on a maintenance rack nearby. Unlike the stripped plate of a Bloodclaw, this war gear bore primitive totems and etched Fenrisian runes of strength and warding. "Your battle record has earned you proper war gear," Jürgen announced. This belonged to Scorison Frostbeard, a grey hunter who fell against Tyrannid filth on Moraz III. "It has been repaired, reconsecrated, and modified to accommodate your particular fighting style." I approached it with reverence. To receive a fallen brother's war gear was to inherit a legacy. The armor was magnificent, each plate a work of art and a masterpiece of protection. It will not save you if you continue to fight with such disregard for your own survival, Jurgen warned, his tone softening by a hair. Learn balance, whelp. The most dangerous weapon is the one that endures. Frostbeard's armor fit as though it had been crafted for me. The machine spirit within it was strong and responsive, adapting quickly to my movement. It felt right, in a way my previous plate never had. Like some echo of its former bearer recognized a kinship. New armor brought new expectations. After Holder, Pack Grimfang received more complex assignments, missions that demanded subtlety alongside strength. Surgical strikes against heretic enclaves. Recovery of ancient technology from dead worlds. Elimination of Xenos threats before they could fully surface. And through it all, the wolf within me grew. Each battle fed it. Each kill strengthened its claim in the balance of my being. Between engagements, it began to surface without the stimulus of war. A brother would make a careless gesture, and my hand would flash to his throat before thought caught up. A chapter serf would approach too quickly, and I would turn with bared fangs, ready to tear out a throat over a shadow that wasn't there. Thor Grim noticed. The wolf priests noticed. I was called for additional hypno-indoctrination, subjected to rites meant to reinforce what remained of my humanity against the rising influence of the Canis Helix. For a time, it worked. The wolf retreated, becoming once more a tool rather than a constant pressure behind the eyes. Then came Forskenv, the campaign that would define my existence and show me the true horror of what I might become. Forskenv was an agri-world on the eastern fringe. Vast crop seas, scattered settlements, a thin web of authority stretched across too much land. Initial reports spoke of a chaos cult taking root among the population, its influence spreading through the planetary government like disease. The Third Great Company was dispatched to burn out the taint before it could metastasize. What we found was worse. The planet had fallen to a genestealer infestation. Alien parasites working through generations until nearly 80% of the population carried the corruption, hybrid abominations loyal only to the tyrannid hive mind. By the time we understood the truth, our forces were already scattered across the world in small strike teams, isolated and vulnerable to coordinated swarms. Pack Grimfang, 3 squads of grey hunters and a venerable dreadnought deployed to the planetary capital to secure the governor and his staff for interrogation. We found the government complex abandoned, corridors marked by hurried evacuation, doors left open, cogitators still warm. Deeper in, we found the first unmistakable signs. Security corpses butchered in a pattern that spoke of claws and hunger. Strange organic residue in ventilation shafts, a sweet, cloying reek of Xenos pheromones seeping through the air filtration. "Full alert," Thor Grim ordered, voice tight with controlled rage. "This is no cult. Call extraction, now." Before the Vox officer could comply, the attack began. They came from everywhere at once, hybrids spilling from hidden passages and service ducts. Pure-strain genestealers dropped from ceiling panels, claws capable of ripping through Astartes' plate. The ambush was perfect, escape routes severed, pack members cut off from one another, the formation broken. I was separated and driven back into what had once been the governor's private office. 3 hybrids advanced, once human forms twisted into a mockery of mankind, movements unnaturally fluid, guided by the shared psychic leash of the hive. My bolter spoke. Each shot found what should have been fatal points. Yet the hybrids moved with a terrible anticipation, as if they could feel my aim before I committed to it. They fell, and more replaced them, pouring through the doorway in an endless, silent tide. I backed up until my plate struck the office's panoramic window. Beyond it, the capital was in motion, countless hybrid forms converging on the complex like a living flood. Then the leader beast appeared. A pure strain pushed through its own swarm, chitin gleaming under the office lights, mouth opening to reveal row upon row of needle teeth. Not a mere attacker, a patriarch, or something close to one. Its movements carried not just hunger, but intelligence. It charged. Even my enhanced senses struggled to track it. I fired until my magazine ran dry, each round impacting, each impact failing to slow it in any meaningful way. Then it was on me. Claws raked across my chest plate, carving deep furrows into ceramite. I dropped the empty bolter and drew my combat knife, already knowing how inadequate it was. Its talons found weak points with unnatural precision, slicing through seals and biting into the black carapace beneath. Pain flared as alien claws pierced transhuman flesh. I drove my knife into its torso with all my strength. The beast barely acknowledged it. Its jaws snapped toward my throat. I twisted aside, tearing open old wounds that had never truly healed. The creature pressed closer, additional limbs wrapped around my armor, claws anchoring into backplate and shoulder guards, pulling me into a killing embrace. In that moment, I faced more than death. If I fell here, my gene seed might be lost, or worse. So I did the one thing the wolf priest had warned me against. I surrendered to the wolf, not partially, not briefly, completely. I threw open every mental gate I had built and invited the beast to take control with a silent, furious defiance against the alien horror trying to devour me. The change was immediate. My awareness shrank back as something else seized the body. Bone shifted. Structure reformed. Pain existed, but distant, like weather on a horizon. Claws tore free from my fingertips, punching through the ceramite of my gauntlets. My jaw thrust forward, canines extending into true fangs meant for rending. What rose in my place was neither man nor wolf, but a nightmare shaped by flawed gene seed and Fenrisian savagery. The Wulfen's shadow given form. For the first time, the genus dealer hesitated. What followed returns to me only in shards. Violence too fast, too absolute. The sound of chitin breaking under strength that felt borrowed from something ancient and wrong. The bitter, chemical taste of alien blood. The Patriarch's dying scream as I tore it apart with raw fury I no longer tried to name. When awareness returned, I stood alone in the office. The room was devastated. Dozens of hybrids and genus dealers lay broken around me. My armor hung in tatters from a body swollen beyond its proper shape. Ceramite torn apart by a transformation it had never been designed to contain. And worst of all, I was still changing. The wolf had tasted total control and did not want to surrender it. I felt my humanity slipping, memory and identity dissolving into instinct. Brother, the voice came from the doorway. Thor Grimm stood there, Terminator armor scarred by heavy combat, thunderhammer dripping with alien ichor. Beside him stood a wolf priest, staff held ready, its power contained like lightning under ice. I turned toward them with a growl that was barely speech. A distant part of me recognized pack. But the wolf saw only threats stepping onto its kill ground. I dropped into a crouch, claws gouged marble, muscles bunched for the leap that would carry me into them. Bjornri Halva, the wolf priest intoned, his voice layered with ritual cadence, hypnotic pattern, command made sound. Son of Fenris, brother of the Fang, hear my voice through the storm of blood. Something in those words pierced the red fog. An old memory of snow and oath, of standing before the Fang's priests as a boy and swearing myself to Russ and the chapter. My charge faltered. The wolf serves the warrior. The priest continued, advancing slowly, one hand out, both command and calm. The warrior serves the emperor. Remember your oaths. Remember who you are. The wolf snarled inside me, fighting to keep its grip. But the hesitation created a gap, a thin crack where my humanity could wedge itself. I seized it. The struggle was worse than any wound. It felt like my soul being torn apart and stitched back together with jagged wire. I collapsed to my knees, body convulsing as the transformation began to reverse imperfectly. Bones shifted back toward human form, but not fully. Claws withdrew, leaving my fingertips permanently altered. The muzzle receded, yet my canines remained extended beyond even space wolf norm. When it ended, I knelt amid ruin, Neither fully Astartes nor fully Wulfen. Marked. Fortunate, the wolf priest said quietly as he examined me. The change was nearly complete. Few return from that brink. Thor Grim watched from a step back, unreadable behind his helm. Yet something in his stance suggested a weariness I had never seen in him. "Can he be trusted?" he asked the priest, not speaking to me, but about me, as if I were a dangerous relic. The wolf priest placed a hand on my head and murmured rites in the oldest tongue of Fenris. I felt his mind brush mine, testing the boundary between man and beast, pressing against the walls I had rebuilt around the wolf. "For now," he said at last. "But he will require close observation. The curse has marked him deeply." I was evacuated from Forskinv that day, pulled from active duty while the great company continued the purge. The armor ruined by my transformation was melted down and reforged. My weapons were ritually cleansed. My body, changed forever, became a subject of relentless scrutiny by the wolf priests. For 6 months, I endured hypno-indoctrination, purification rites, and conditioning meant to strengthen control. They could not remove the taint. "The curse is woven into the Canis helix," they told me. "A double-edged blade that grants our chapter its gifts and its doom. We cannot cut it from you, but we can teach you to master it, to hold the line even at the edge." During one session, the wolf priest's voice turned grave. "You walk the knife's edge now," he said. "Neither fully man nor fully beast. This is your burden for the remainder of your service to the Allfather." I accepted the truth without complaint. I had seen the alternative, felt it wearing my skin from the inside, and I knew exactly what waited for those who failed to hold that balance. I had felt the wolf's desire to strip away every last vestige of humanity, to become nothing but instinct and violence. That road ended in only 2 ways: execution by my own brothers, or exile into the wilds of Fenris, where the lost were sometimes cast to spend their remaining days as beasts until the ice finally claimed them. When the wolf priests cleared me to return to active duty, it was not as a blood claw. Forskinv had aged me, if not in flesh, then in spirit. It pushed me forward along the chapter's path too quickly, like a blade forced through a whetstone. I was reassigned as a lone wolf, a designation usually reserved for the sole survivors of shattered packs who swore an oath of vengeance. In my case, the title carried a second meaning. I hunted alone because the wolf within me made close brotherhood dangerous. I would deploy alongside the great company, but I would operate apart, given objectives suited to my condition, missions where isolation was not a weakness, but a safeguard. My first deployment as a lone wolf came 8 months after Forskinv. A forge world in the Helix cluster had gone silent. Its tithe of weapons and vehicles to nearby Astra Militarum regiments had ceased without explanation. The Third Great Company was tasked with investigating and, if necessary, seizing the forges for the Imperium. I deployed with the initial strike force, but separated once planetary contact was made. While the main body prepared to strike the primary gates, my orders were simple: infiltrate the heart of the forge complex, determine the status of the Adeptus Mechanicus leadership, and, if possible, restore communication with the orbiting fleet. The world was a hellscape. Industrial pollution choked the horizon. The sky was permanently black with chemical clouds. The ground was coated in toxic sludge that would have eaten through unprotected human flesh in seconds. Even my armor systems complained, warning runes flickering across my visor as I moved through the wasteland. Ahead, the forge complex rose like a mountain of metal and smoke. No lights burned in its countless windows. No movement crossed its gantries or loading bays. It looked abandoned. But my enhanced senses caught the truth. Subtle vibrations, the deep thrum of machinery working somewhere far inside. The forges still ran. The question was, for whom? I found entry through a waste disposal chute. The passage was so tight I had to remove sections of my armor and carry them, squeezing through bare in places where no space wolf should ever be bare. The vulnerability made the wolf bristle. defensive instincts snapping at the edges of my mind. But I used the techniques the wolf priests had drilled into me and held it in check. Inside, the silence became stranger. Production lines ran at full capacity, yet no human workers moved among them. No servitors, no overseers. Automated systems flowed with unsettling precision, assembling weapons and vehicles that were diverted away from standard distribution routes and funneled toward a central collection point. I followed the stream of finished material deeper into the complex. The air grew hotter. The roar of machinery rose to a deafening crescendo. Heat shimmered off metal like breath off a predator's jaw. At the forge's heart, I found the reason for the planet's silence. The Mechanicus leadership had fallen not to mere negligence or malfunction, but to a technological heresy so profound it felt like sacrilege made physical. They stood arranged in a circle around a pulsating mass of machine and organic matter. Their bodies merged into it through mechadendrites and direct neural interfaces. At the center was what looked like an STC core, yet altered in ways that violated every law of the cult Mechanicus. The tech priests chanted in Binharic. Their augmented voices formed patterns that made my enhanced hearing ache, like needles behind the eyes. The thing in the center responded. Sections shifted and reconfigured as if alive. Tendrils of living metal extended outward to absorb the weapons and vehicles being fed into the chamber, consuming the Imperium's own tithe like meat offered to a god that should not exist. I recognized the stink of warp influence, yet it was not the usual frenzy of chaos. This corruption was colder, methodical, precise, like a surgeon with a blade made of hate. The tech priests had found something ancient in the planet's core, something that promised knowledge and delivered only a new form of slavery. I sent a brief encrypted burst to the orbiting fleet, my helmet struggling against interference radiating from the abomination. 3 words. Enough to damn the world. Exterminatus, tech heresy, confirmed. Then I moved to my second objective. None of the corrupted priests could be allowed to escape. None of their research could be permitted to survive. I planted melter charges at key structural points around the chamber. The wolf snarled with anticipation, hungry for the violence to come, but I kept it leashed. This was not the time for frenzy. This was the time for clean killing. The fight was brief and vicious. For all their augmetics, the priests were not prepared for the focused violence of a space wolf. I moved among them like a shadow. My knife severed vital connection points, cables, interfaces, conduits where flesh met steel. My bolt pistol ended the more heavily armored with precise shots that turned their Binharic chanting into silence. But their creation, that was something else. As the last tech priest fell, the machine-organism hybrid seemed to wake fully to my presence. Living metal tendrils whipped toward me with impossible speed, seeking to ensnare and absorb armor, flesh, machine spirit into its mass. The wolf surged in response. This time, I did not wrestle it down in panic. I channeled it. I let its strength and speed flood my limbs without giving it my mind. My movements became unnaturally fluid. I dodged the tendrils, closed distance, and emptied my bolt pistol into what appeared to be a central processing node. The detonations tore deep into the flesh metal core. The abomination shuddered. It did not die. Appendages erupted to replace those I destroyed. The thing adapted as if it could learn in the time it took me to breathe. The melter charges were seconds from detonation, so I made a final, desperate attack. I leapt onto the construct itself, gauntleted hands plunging into its surface, searching for the STC core that pulsed like a heart beneath layers of living machine. The material fought back, trying to flow around my armor, to invade my systems. Warning runes flared as foreign code assaulted my machine spirit, probing for a way in. For a heartbeat, I felt the armor recoil, as if it could feel the violation. With a howl that was half man and half wolf, I tore the STC core free. The entire construct convulsed. Its tendrils thrashed wildly as its controlling intelligence was ripped out like a spine. I triggered my jump pack, salvaged long ago from a fallen assault marine, and launched clear as the melter charges detonated. The blast hurled me through the forge complex. It overwhelmed my stabilizers and sent me crashing through walls like a shell fired from an angry god. When I woke, the facility was burning. Secondary explosions rippled through it as volatile stockpiles ignited. Smoke turned the air into poison. The STC core was still in my grasp. Dormant now, its lights extinguished, its hunger temporarily asleep. It was too dangerous to destroy without examination by loyal hands, but equally dangerous to let it exist. With no better option, I maglocked it to my armor and began the long, perilous return to extraction. The orbital bombardment started before I reached the rendezvous. Lance strikes from the fleet hammered the forge complex, turning millennia of human achievement into slag in minutes. I watched from a ridge several kilometers away, the wolf satisfied by the destruction, the man sick with the necessity of it. When I finally reached the extraction Thunderhawk, I delivered the core directly to the senior tech priest assigned to our force. His reaction was reverence twisted with horror, as his sensors read what his eyes could not. "This must go to Mars immediately," he declared, voice betraying an emotion he tried to bury beneath machine monotone. The Fabricator General himself must examine this corruption. Wolf Lord Crom Dragongaze disagreed. After reviewing my report and consulting the wolf priests, he ordered the core sealed within stasis and transferred to the Fang for study by our own Iron Priests. The tech priest protested. He was overruled. Some technologies were too dangerous to release into the wider Imperium, even into hands that called themselves loyal. Years passed, decades, then centuries. I continued as a lone wolf, sent where my solitude served the pack best. Sometimes I worked alongside wolf scouts, whose independent nature made them more compatible with my hunting style. Other times, I was attached to great company assaults as a shock weapon, aimed at the enemy's weakest point and unleashed like a blade. Always, the struggle remained. After every campaign, every kill, the wolf grew stronger. The rituals and mental disciplines the wolf priests taught me held, at first. Then they held less. Then they held only sometimes. My lucid moments shortened. My rages grew more frequent, harder to contain. On Midgard's Reach, I slaughtered a squad of traitor guardsmen who had surrendered. The wolf did not recognize the concept of quarter. In the void battle over Thantos IV, I broke formation to pursue a fleeing enemy vessel, ignoring direct orders from Wolf Lord Crom himself, because the wolf wanted the chase more than it respected command. During the third pacification of Garas, I hunted a Drukari Archon through the Underhive for 3 days without food, water, or sleep, driven by a single-minded hunger that felt less like duty and more like obsession. Each time, the wolf priests dragged me back from the edge with renewed conditioning, reforging mental barriers that grew thinner every decade. We all knew the truth, though none of us spoke it aloud. The curse was claiming me, slowly, inevitably. The end came 274 years after my induction into the chapter. We deployed to a death world designated Tertius Gamma, a planet of perpetual twilight and carnivorous vegetation so dense it swallowed light and sound. Intelligence suggested a Chaos Warband had established a base there, staging raids against nearby Imperial worlds. I was sent 2 weeks ahead of the main force to locate the stronghold and assess their strength. It should have been routine, the kind of operation I'd executed dozens of times. But Tertius Gamma was wrong in ways I struggled to capture in mission reports. The vegetation responded to movement with near-sentient purpose. The fauna behaved as if guided by an intelligence that did not belong to nature. Even the air seemed to carry whispers just below conscious hearing, like teeth scraping against the inside of the skull. I located the Chaos compound on the 11th day, a sprawling base built around a Xeno structure of immense antiquity. Rough estimates put the war band at 200 corrupted Astartes, predominantly word-bearers, supported by thousands of cultists and mutant slaves. They were excavating. They pulled artifacts from the earth that pulsed with baleful energy, even at distance. Watching from concealment, I became aware, slowly, horribly, that something watched me in return. Not the word-bearers, they remained blind to my presence. Something else, something ancient and patient, awakened by the excavation's disturbance. That night, as I prepared my final report before the great company's arrival, it spoke, not in words, but in images and sensations pressed directly into my mind. It showed Fenris before human settlement, when the great wolves ruled without challenge. It showed the Primarch project, genetic tampering and deliberate shaping, then the specific modifications made to Lemonruss that bound him to those predators. And it showed me the fatal flaw of the Canis helix, not an accident, a deliberate feature, a time bomb planted in the gene seed of the VI Legion. Worst of all, it showed me my future, the inevitable surrender, the final transformation, years of mindless savagery and death at my brother's hands. Then it offered an alternative. Acceptance of its blessing would stabilize the helix. It would let me keep my mind while accessing the full power of the wolf. All it demanded in return was freedom from its aeons-long imprisonment beneath the planet. The wolf in me yearned to accept. It sensed a kindred predator, something vast and terrible. The man I still was recognized the lie, the corruption wrapped in the shape of salvation. This was no benevolent spirit. It was a Xenos abomination. Perhaps the very thing that poisoned the word-bearer's excavated relics. I triggered the emergency beacon and called for immediate extraction and orbital bombardment of the excavation site. The entity's psychic scream of rage tore through my mind as I rejected it. The sound shattered the barriers I'd spent centuries rebuilding between man and beast. The transformation began instantly, more violent, more complete than any episode before. Armor split as my body expanded. Bone and muscle reconfigured into the Wulfen's shape. But this time there was no wolf priest at my shoulder. No ritual cadence to anchor me. No pack to hold me down. Only the beast, triumphant at last in its centuries-long siege against my identity. My last human memory is staring at my hands as they became claws, watching skin darken and thicken into leathery hide, coarse fur erupting along my forearms. I did not feel fear. I did not feel regret. Only inevitability. This had been waiting for me from the moment the Canis helix entered my blood beneath the fang. What followed exists not in memory, but in the chapter's records, told to me later when a fragment of sanity returned. The great company arrived to find not a chaos base, but a crater of glass and fused rock where bombardment had struck. They also found a trail, mutilated word-bearers, shattered cultists, a path of ruin leading away from the blast zone into the Death World's forests. They followed it, recognizing the signs of a Wulfen at work. The savagery, the trophy-taking, the ritual patterns that went beyond hunger. For 3 days they hunted their fallen brother across the hostile land. On the 4th, they found me. Or rather, they found what I had become. A fully transformed Wulfen, powerful beyond even Astartes' norms, with no recognition of oaths or brothers. The man was gone, buried beneath the wolf's victory. Protocol demanded termination. A clean death delivered by brothers in arms, the only mercy for one truly lost. Wolf Lord Crom himself led the execution party, bringing with him the same wolf priest who had overseen much of my conditioning across the centuries. They cornered me in a ravine, sealing exits with disciplined bolter and plasma fire. I fought with mindless ferocity, wounding 3 battle brothers before Crom engaged me directly. His frost blade met my claws, his tactical genius met my animal cunning. The duel was brief and brutal. For all the curse's strength, I was no match for a wolf lord in Terminator plate, wielding a master-crafted frost blade. The killing stroke should have ended my saga, clean and final. It did not. At the crucial moment, the wolf priest intervened. He saw something, some flicker in my eyes, some hint of recognition that should not have been there. Against Crom's direct order, he struck me with his crozius and rendered me unconscious instead of letting the blade fall. I was taken in chains aboard the strike cruiser and confined within a specialized null-field chamber built to hold the most dangerous of entities. On the journey back to Fenris, I raged against my bonds. No humanity showed itself. I was only the beast. Wolf Lord Crom argued repeatedly for my execution. Chapter tradition, fleet safety, simple necessity. The wolf priest held to his conviction that something of the man remained, buried deep beneath the curse. When we returned to the Fang, I was transferred to chambers far below, ancient even by space wolf standards. Rooms carved from Fenris's living stone, inscribed with wards that dated back to Russ himself. There, the wolf priests began their work. They did not attempt to reverse the transformation. The chapter knew what the wider Imperium refused to admit. The Wulfen's physical change is permanent, irreversible by any right or technology the space wolves possessed. Instead, they sought to reach the man buried inside the beast, to rekindle the spark the wolf priest had seen in that ravine on Tertius Gamma. The process took years. Ritual hypnotherapy under senior wolf priests. Experimental treatments devised by Iron Priests using recovered fragments of the Emperor's own work on the Primarch project. All of it aimed at one impossible goal. Not to remake my body, but to make my mind remember what it had been, before the wolf became my only truth. Exposure to sacred relics of Layman Russ himself followed. Objects said to carry an echo of the Primarch's presence, as if his shadow still clung to iron and bone. Progress came in microscopic increments. First, eye contact held for a full second. No longer the quick, predatory glance of an animal measuring prey. Then, recognition. A shift in posture, a change in scent when familiar battle brothers entered the containment chamber. And finally, after nearly a decade of relentless work, speech. A single word, guttural and broken by a throat never meant for human language, yet unmistakable. Brother. From that moment, recovery accelerated. The beast remained ascendant in flesh, the Wulfen form permanent and unchangeable, but the warrior's mind began to reassert itself with growing strength. I relearned language. I remembered my oaths. I recalled my history. I recognized myself as something distinct from the instincts that had consumed me. What emerged from that long, brutal process was neither fully man nor holy beast, but something unprecedented in chapter record. A Wulfen with consciousness and will, a monster with a soul. The wolf priests argued endlessly over what my existence meant. Some saw hope, that other lost brothers might be recovered through similar rites. Others warned that I was an anomaly too dangerous to tolerate, a potential vector for corruption that should never be allowed to persist. Wolf Lord Crom remained skeptical. He demanded constant tests of loyalty and control. The trials were harsh because they had to be. Exposure to the scent and sight of blood, simulated combat in confined spaces, direct psychic probing by rune priests to measure the stability of my mind. Through it all, the thin balance I had forged held, often by the narrowest margin. After 15 years of confinement and testing, the chapter finally reached a decision about my fate. I would not be executed, as tradition demanded for those claimed by the curse. Nor would I be released to serve as I once had, for my condition made that impossible. Instead, I was given a role no other space wolf had ever carried, one made for my state and my state alone. I became the keeper of lost brothers, guardian of the deep chamber within the Fang, where those in the early stages of transformation are confined. Not yet fully gone, but beyond recovery by conventional means. They exist in a twilight between man and beast, too valuable to kill, too dangerous to unleash. They are the chapter's most carefully guarded shame. And my transformation allows what no normal Astartes could manage. I can speak to them in the only language they still understand. I can read the growls, the posture, the tension in their bodies. I can translate their needs, what remains of their thoughts, to the wolf priests who study them and struggle to hold them back from the edge. In turn, I serve as living proof that the mind can endure even total physical corruption. That a brother is not always lost the moment the beast takes the flesh. It is a lonely existence. I am neither fully part of the chapter nor completely severed from it. Brothers who knew me before the change treat me with a mixture of respect and caution. Newer initiates look on me with superstitious dread, a walking reminder of what lurks in their own gene seed. Only among my charges, those suspended in their own slow ruin, do I find something like kinship. Some days, clarity comes. The balance feels almost natural. I can recall centuries of service with something close to a human perspective. Other days, the beast surges, and it takes every scrap of will to hold on to even the simplest pieces of identity. The wolf priests never stop studying me. They hope to pull some usable truth from my condition, something that will spare future generations. I submit to their tests without complaint. If my suffering can spare even one brother from my fate, then it gives purpose to an existence that might otherwise feel like a cruel joke of indifferent gods. On rare occasions, I am permitted to leave my underground domain and walk the upper levels of the Fang, always under guard, always watched, but able to see the stars above Fenris again, to feel the biting wind on flesh no longer truly human. During one such excursion, nearly 30 years after my transformation, I encountered a young bloodclaw who stared at me with more curiosity than fear. "You are Bjorn," he said, and the courage in his voice surprised me. "They speak of you in the training halls." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The beast was close to the surface, agitated by unfamiliar territory and the presence of warm-blooded life. "They say you chose this," the young warrior continued, as if the idea offended his sense of how a saga should end. "That you could have died cleanly, but instead chose to exist as you are now." I weighed his words before answering. When my voice came, it was a rumbling growl that still shaped itself into low Gothic. "Not chose," I corrected him. "Survived. There is a difference." He seemed to turn that distinction over in his mind, thoughtful despite his youth. "For what purpose?" he asked. "What glory remains in such an existence?" I had asked myself that question countless times in the long years beneath the Fang. Why continue this half-life, this constant war against the beast within? Why not seek the clean end of a frost blade and whatever waited in the halls of Russ? "Glory is for sagas," I told him, the words coming heavier as the wolf stirred. "Service does not require glory, only endurance." The bloodclaw nodded slowly. Curiosity faded, replaced by respect. He struck fist to chest in the chapter's salute, then moved on, leaving me alone with the wind and with myself. That brief exchange crystallized something I had known by instinct, but never spoken, even in my own mind. The space wolves revere the warrior ideal. We celebrate heroic deeds and glorious death. We carve our legends into sagas and sing them in feast halls. But beneath that savage nobility lies a deeper truth. We are weapons made for a purpose. Our lives are service, not self. And the wolf within us is not a curse in the simple sense. It is the price we pay for the strength we wield, the necessary counterweight to what we have been remade into. Some brothers pay that price in small coin over centuries. Others, like me, pay it all at once, in catastrophic transformation. But every son of Russ lives with the knowledge that the beast waits inside, patient and eternal. In the decades since my change, other brothers have joined me in that twilight between man and Wulfen. Some retain enough of their minds to serve beside me as guardians and interpreters. Others slip deeper, despite every effort, into savagery that cannot be called back. Each case is different, shaped by will, by trauma, by the moment the line finally breaks. From studying us, the wolf priests have developed new rites, new techniques, methods that have helped several brothers step back from the brink of total loss. This may be my greatest contribution. Not glory, not conquest, but knowledge bought in pain, used to save others. There are whispers among the tradition-bound that we should not exist, that our continued presence is a deviation from the Emperor's design. They cite the old practices, clean deaths for those claimed by the curse, mercy rather than prolonged half-life. In my darker moments, I find myself agreeing. But then I remember the words of the wolf priest who spared me on that blood-soaked day on Tertius Gamma. He told me years later that the true test of a son of Rus is not how gloriously he fights, nor how nobly he dies. It is how he endures the burden placed upon him by his gene seed, his chapter, and his oath to the All-Father. By that measure, perhaps I have not failed entirely. I endure. I serve. The wolf within me remains powerful, always testing the limits of my control. But it no longer rules unchallenged. We exist in perpetual conflict, neither side able to claim final victory. And I have come to believe this is the true nature of the space wolves, not the noble savages of imperial propaganda, not the mindless beasts our enemies fear, but warriors trapped in an eternal struggle, human reason against animal instinct. We draw power from the wolf, yet must never surrender fully to its call. The curse is only the most visible expression of that truth, the physical shape of a war that begins the moment the Canis Helix enters our blood. Those who hold the balance become heroes, their names carved into sagas that outlive their bones. Those who lose become cautionary tales, or like me, living reminders of the price of failure. Yet even in failure there can be service. Even in transformation there can be purpose. Outsiders never understand that. They see only savagery and assume it is mindless. They see fury and think it undirected. But even at our most bestial, we remain weapons of the Emperor, tools crafted for a purpose, dedicated to its fulfillment. I will likely never again know glory at the forefront of a great company assault. I will never feel the easy camaraderie of the pack, or the simple satisfaction of a hunt cleanly ended. My existence is limitation and vigilance, a constant watch against the beast that shares my skin. But I endure. I serve, in the only way left to me. I remain a son of Rus, a warrior of the Fang. The wolf within me snarls its eternal challenge, and each day I answer with renewed determination. This is my burden, my duty, my purpose. Not glory, but service. Not savage nobility, but patient endurance. In the darkness beneath the Fang, among brothers caught in various stages of transformation, I found a kind of peace in that understanding. We are what we were made to be, no more and no less. The curse is not our enemy, it is our nature, something to be managed, not defeated. Bjorn Rihalvar, once Bloodclaw, once Lone Wolf, now Keeper of Lost Brothers. My saga continues, though it will never be sung in the feast halls above. My service endures, though it takes forms no aspirant would ever choose. The wolf remains eternal and hungry in me, but it does not define me completely. This is what it means to be a space wolf. Not the glory outsiders imagine, nor the savagery they fear, but the endless struggle between man and beast. The price we pay, the burden we bear, the service we render to the All-Father, to the chapter, to mankind itself. In the end, perhaps there is its own kind of glory in endurance, a nobility in carrying what cannot be changed, a warrior's honor in meeting each day as a battle won by will, not by blade. I am Bjorn Rihalvar of Fenris. I am wolf and man, monster and warrior. I endure. I serve. That is enough. That must be enough. For in the grim darkness of the far future, glory is fleeting, but service is eternal.